Anyway, what I'd like to do is talk to you about sort of the changing grid and have more discussion about the reliability plan down here in Southern California, because I think there's an interesting conversation about the shifting technology on the grid and things that are happening. So as we get into Q&A, we'll talk about the reliability plan a little bit more. First, though, I'd like to talk to you about things that are happening in the energy industry. And I know you all have heard about San Onofre and the growth of renewable power, the solar installed on rooftops. Jim Avery regales me with the countdown here on a regular basis. New energy storage systems that are being developed, and EVs, electric vehicles, that are going to have an impact on the grid as well. It's really a unique time in our business. With all the changes taking place, it may seem like kind of a dangerous time to be in my business or Jim's business. But really, the ISO, we see this as a moment and an opportunity to design a new grid that's cleaner and more efficient than ever. But we also have to maintain reliability, as you well know, with the issues you have down here. First, let me tell you a bit about my organization. Some of you know us well, and maybe some of you less well. The California Independent System Operator is a public benefit, a not-for-profit public benefit corporation. We operate the state's wholesale electric grid and run the only centralized wholesale market in the West. Much of the country, particularly the East, is covered by what are ISOs, or organized markets. At this side of the Rockies, though, you don't find many except for here in California. Our market optimizes the grid every 5 seconds, and we actually dispatch the grid optimizes the grid every 5 minutes. And what we do is we find the lowest cost dispatch given the transmission and the generation available to us so that we can save money. And the other thing we do is we dispatch the grid every 4 seconds to make sure that it's balanced. In our market last year, we cleared about $8.5 billion. These are transactions in the wholesale electric market where buyers and sellers come together. We operate 25,000 miles of high voltage wire connected to about 2,000 power plants that we have under our control. We're a 50,000 megawatt system. To give you some perspective, your home is probably about 2 or 3 kilowatts, unless you have your air conditioner going full blown. We serve about 30 million people in California. But really what I want to do is talk about the changing landscape of the grid. Some of it gets to the heart of our plan for Southern California and some of the changing needs. But the grid is changing, certainly as we know it. The biggest change probably is the 33% renewable mandate the utilities are operating under right now that they need to be achieved by 2020. The fact of the matter is, by 2020, we're likely to actually have more like 40% renewable power on the grid. Given distributed generation and the utilities are likely to overshoot 33%. So we're well on our way. We have nearly 6,000 megawatts of wind on the system, and it continues to give us a new peak every year. Right now, the peak is 30% over that was reached in 2012. On the solar side, we have about 3,000 megawatts, thank you, on the grid, and we get a new record on solar almost every day. We have 3 new units that are over just on the border of Nevada for about 375 megawatts that are coming online soon. But in the midst of all of this, we also lost one of our most reliable generating plants, San Onofre. It was 2,200 megawatts of power, served about 1.5 million customers. It was there day and night. The closure of Songs brought a new immediacy to the challenge that we have on the grid here in Southern California. The other variable that we're contending with is that many of the generating units are on the coast. As you may see, if you've surfed, apparently the power plants are a critical milestone, so you know where you are, I'm told. But those plants are supposed to be retired because they use what's called once-through cooling technology. That means they bring in seawater and they send it out. That once-through cooling entraps sea life and things like that. So the State Water Commission wants the owners of those units to either retrofit them or retire them. The problem with that is many of those plants are in local capacity areas. That is, if you don't have a power plant there, there's no other way to get power in. The transmission lines are too constricted. So that causes us some problems that we have to deal with. Plus those units, given the renewables, allow us to ramp the system up and down to contend with the fluctuations of solar and wind. So we have a lot of challenges. But those challenges are presenting opportunities, and I think an organization like CleanTECH can seize those opportunities. These tectonic changes we are seeing is really the start of a new electric business. And the enablers is technology. The technology is not acting alone. It's actually being put in the hands of the consumer. Thanks to technology, consumers are being introduced to energy choices they never had before. They are gaining and taking control over energy production and consumption. Right now, you can get a fairly good-sized storage device from Solar City. Solar City gets those storage devices from Tesla. As you know, Tesla largely makes batteries, and then they put a car around it. Those batteries can be had for $10 a month. So you can sync up your solar array with a battery array, and pretty soon you've got pretty good control over what you're doing. But let's think about how far we've come and how fast it's arrived. Consumers are installing solar panels at an incredible rate. Right here in San Diego, there are 21,000, probably growing. Jim, what's the latest count? 28,000. See, my data's already old. And about 5% a month, as I recall correctly. And maybe that's grown too. That's an incredible growth rate. They are gaining the ability with that on-site storage as well. So many can participate now in the grid. It's becoming more democratic, and they're getting control. Consumer choice and control are advancing very fast. So where does all this go? Let me paint this picture of the grid 2050. Renewables will be a more prominent mode of generation for the West, clearly, and perhaps much of the U.S. Generation will be far more distributed, whether it be solar panels on rooftops or fuel cells or things like that. Thanks to technology and new rate structures, the consumers will become a more prominent participant as well. Consumers will take more precise control over the energy use. You saw that Google just bought Nest. Did everybody see that? Everybody knows what Nest does. So Google wants to take over the home. And, well, if they haven't already. It's happening. And some of this intermediation that I'm talking about is happening a lot. You all recall Borders Books. They are no more. You recall AT&T and their landline business. It is no more. So these changes, in fact, could very well happen. So the energy mix is mixed and unclear. Clearly, in the short term, we will have to rely on the technologies that exist today, whether they be gas plants or solar in the desert or long transmission lines. But in the long term, distributed energy could very well become a more prominent mode. Now, what does this mean to you? The power delivery business needs to be reinvented. It's going to be reinvented. The technology needs to continue its rapid evolution, and we need to welcome it. At the ISO, we don't want to stand in the way of it. We want to make sure that we have market apparatus that bring it in. And the regulators, they need to adapt to contribute to the new market model that rewards consumers for participating in changing usage patterns. New technologies to develop to automate the home, provide background demand response and energy efficiency. Opportunities for storage will be abundant. It is a key for truly unlocking the potential for renewables and higher levels of renewables without a substantial backup fleet. We are starting to see the movement in storage, as I said. We can learn from others. At the University of California, San Diego, they run its own microgrid. I think I saw someone who has a sign. Is somebody from San Diego up here? You have your own microgrid, while still being interconnected to the larger electric grid. And it serves as an example of what can be. At UCSD, as another example, the microgrid provides the ability to manage 42 megawatts of generating capacity, including a central cogeneration plant, an array of solar, voltaic, installations and a fuel cell that operates on natural gas reclaimed from a landfill site. So it is truly the definition of a microgrid. So let me conclude. I'll let Dr. Weisenmiller come up here and we'll talk a little bit more about our plan for reliability down here in the Q&A. There's no doubt that this is an incredible moment in the history of the grid, and we all have to work together to figure out how that will be formed. But I think that great change breeds great opportunity, and I think we have great opportunity for all. So let me leave it with that, and I will turn it over to Dr. Weisenmiller.
Thanks, Steve. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning and talk about basically the challenges and opportunities we're all viewing in the technology area. I'm the chairman of the California Energy Commission. We are approaching our 40th anniversary. The War on Alquist Act was originally signed by then Governor Reagan and implemented by then Governor Brown. Actually, Jerry and not his dad. Energy Commission has 6 major functions. One of the things we do is siting thermal power plants. Anything that's over 50 megawatts, we act as a one-stop siting agency for that project. We also do the state's planning for energy. We have an independent energy policy report that actually we just adopted last week's version, which focused very much on energy efficiency. We're starting one now looking at transportation and starting to examine those issues. We also do building and appliance standards. This summer, our new building standards will kick into place for residential and commercial buildings. They are 25% more efficient than our last round of building standards, which is the greatest advance in the Commission's history. We update those every 3 years. In terms of appliance standards, we now have battery charging standards in place. Battery chargers, everyone's house has roughly 11 of those, and an increasing number. Some of those you can feel get hot basically after they've recharged your phone or toothbrush or whatever. They just keep charging it. And so we're basically requiring them to shut off once the battery is charged. So again, that's a way of saving energy. We're looking at additional standards going forward. One of the things we do is R&D. We'll talk a lot about that a little bit later, but we do about $100 million of R&D in the gas and electric sector. We also do, and in fact, Byron would tell you his microgrid and many of his features came out of our joint relationship with him on trying to advance technology. Also, we have a microgrid with Jim Avery he can talk about, sort of a different configuration. So we also do clean fuels and technology. So one of the things we've been doing is working with people on rollout of electric chargers and also trying to work with different local counties to come up with plans for the rollout of electric vehicles and also fuel cell vehicles. And finally, we do contingency planning. First time I met the governor was back on the oil embargo in '78, and we were trying to figure out whether there's going to be gasoline at the fuel pumps the next day. Certainly things are not as dramatic, but bottom line is there's a lot of challenges and opportunities for us in the energy area. When I came back into public service, it's pretty clear that the 2 major challenges facing the state was climate change and the economy. And what we're trying to do, particularly I think safe to say the vision of the governor, is to have California take a leadership role in dealing with climate change, show that it's possible to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in a way which frankly leads to innovation across the board in the energy space, which then should lead for jobs as we can provide some of those products and services throughout the world. In terms of looking at building a little bit off of what Steve said on the changing nature of the energy system, certainly the electricity system is changing in ways which are much different. It's a sector which is not necessarily rapidly changing, but it's certainly facing a lot of changes fairly quickly. One of the things we're dealing with in terms of potential game changers is that the electric system historically was designed to move power from your central station power plant through your transmission lines, back down to the distribution, and then down to your house. At this point, we could have flows on the grid that go from your house out into the grid. And frankly, the grid's not designed. Again, it's much more radial. And so we really have to start thinking about making it much more of a network and having significant amounts of power moving back and forth in the grid. One of the advantages now that we're looking at is with smart technology, we can go basically to smart grids. In smart grids, you would embed communications technology, sensors throughout the grid and be able to deal with those changing patterns of power flow. As we look at the types of devices we're putting in the grid, certainly, one of our goals, is to deal with the air quality issues in Southern California is through zero emissions vehicles. Certainly, if you're looking, say, at the LA basin, 18% of the economy is from goods movement, and at the same time, it faces phenomenal air quality issues. And generally, we find one of the potential solutions is electrifying the transportation sector. And again, once you do that, that should lead to a much cleaner system. But at the same point, we're starting to look at, well, what does that mean as you roll out substantial numbers of zero emissions vehicles? What happens given potential charging loads at your location? At the same time, what are some of the opportunities for vehicle to grid, where you could basically use this batteries in your cars to help us with some of the storage issues on the grid or some of the intermittent issues. So we're now doing a major demonstration project with the Air Force in Los Angeles. It's a vehicle to grid demo. The CalISO has just rolled out a roadmap for vehicle to grid development in California, along with basically the potential of the ZEV vehicles. We're also looking a lot at demand response. One of the things that Commissioner McAllister is very passionate about is demand response. That's one of the things we focused a lot on in the last IPR we adopted. And it's something where, again, technology is a gateway to change what we're doing there, particularly as you look at what you can do with automatic demand response, basically having embedded throughout your home or businesses something which basically can respond automatically to price signals or signals from the CalISO. Again, we'll talk more later, but a couple of years ago, as we were looking at San Onofre and trying to get ready for our first summer without it, one of the things I did was look at what was going on in Southern California in terms of demand response. Now, what we found is most of SDG&E's programs have, a 16 to 24-hour response time. Obviously, we have flex alerts, we have other types of things, but if you're looking for things that can respond in a half hour, there was very little down here. Certainly, Edison had somewhat more, things like pump cycling, air conditioner cycling, but again, in terms of things that if the ISO needed quick response, at that part of our demand response portfolio was lagging down here. So one of the things we're really trying to do is really enhance that part of it. Another thing which we really looked at in the IPR was existing buildings. I said the Energy Commission has been doing building standards since 1978. Now, having said that, there's a lot of buildings in California built before '78. There's a lot that were built under some of our earlier standards that if you're looking at how to really get major impacts on the system through energy efficiency, we have to figure out how to affect those millions and millions of existing buildings. And to really get deep retrofits, a fair number of those are rented space. Again, how do we do that? As we talked about our R&D programs, sort of at the top of our loading order statewide for resources, energy efficiency. Certainly as we go through and allocate R&D funds, energy efficiency is at the top of that loading order. As we go forward, we've talked a little bit about microgrids. I think as we look at the evolution of the grid, on the one hand, we are working to really integrate things better throughout the West. one of the really important initiatives, the CalISO, is the energy balance market. We're trying to deal with the variability of solar and wind by trying to more integrate that throughout the West and deal with opportunities that come, obviously, as you look at the patterns of wind production are much smoothed out somewhat within California. If you could take the whole West, again, it would be much smoother, similarly with solar. But at the same time, we're sort of integrating West-wide. We're also trying to look at microgrids, to look at areas where you have unique opportunities for needing high reliability and or having a variety of resources, both renewables, energy efficiency, and demand response, where you're trying to basically integrate those into a mini utility and provide the level of service and the opportunities there. So I think going forward, we're going to have this trend of combining both region-wide connections with basically a lot of creativity at the local level, and certainly microgrids are a good manifestation of that. Other area which we've certainly done a lot of work on is single phasers, which is basically trying to move forward as we're adding more and more variable resources to the grid, trying to have ways of really tracking how they're interacting and how they're affecting the grid. And one of the things we've done with ARA is a major rollout with the CalISO of single phasers throughout the West. And again, it's like a MRI system for the grid. But now one of the things that Byron is working on is sort of trying to move single phasers down to the distribution system. So as we move more and more DG in that system, that we can again try to maintain a very reliable system, but needing technology is one of the real enablers there. So again, I think the basic message, particularly for this audience, is that as we look at the challenges of the day, that the opportunities really come back in technologies. And certainly there's a lot of creativity on the technology space. And certainly, again, we've talked a lot about the electricity. Certainly when you look at the transportation space, we've talked some about zero emissions vehicles. Certainly fuel cell rollout is going to be coming into California relatively soon. Certainly there's a lot of interest in drop-in fuel. And we've certainly done some research here with people on potentially algae or other ways of, again, trying to deal with that. I think longer term, another huge issue for the state is carbon sequestration. As we deal with our gas plants, basically finding ways to take the greenhouse gas emissions from those plants, capture those, and hopefully provide some degree of value from that. Or similarly, one of the issues we're dealing with on having said climate change, another big area we're looking at is sort of the existing gas system to make sure that we're really controlling the fugitive gas emissions associated with the production, transport, and eventually use of that gas. So again, I think this is a great group, great future for folks. I think really stay focused on the technology options and how we can use those to really transform our energy system. So glad to take questions.
Great, thank you. So I know you guys kind of wanted a dialogue with everyone, so I think
You want to get into
the plan?
reliability plan?
Yeah, that'd be great, and then we'll do Q&A after that.
Sure.
Okay, great.
I guess I can lead with that, and because we're kind of the lead on reliability, and then Bob can chime in, and Jim, if you want to add your 2 cents worth, please do. I know what you're thinking. Jim will, whether we want him to or not. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway,
It'll be more than 2 cents.
be like $1.50 or something. Anyway, it's a Jim roast. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, look, the loss of San Onofre creates a significant reliability problem here in Southern California. And there's a lot of moving parts, so try to, if I can, I'll try to move through the different parts. First of all, Southern California relies a lot on imported power. It comes into San Diego from the north, from power plants in the LA Basin, and from the east out of renewables and generation plants in the desert, and over in Arizona as well. So you bring in a lot of imported power. There is not enough generation in San Diego to provide for its load. So imported power is very important. Now, San Onofre contributes to that in a couple of ways, and I'll come to that. But let me just say that the Sunrise Power Link which many of you know about, probably saved the day. As far as maintaining reliability in Southern California, if we had not gotten that transmission line in place, we'd have really, really had problems. And the folks at San Diego Gas and Electric did a great job of speeding that up as much as they could when we found out that we lost San Onofre. Now, when you import, okay, so San Onofre provided 2,250 megawatts of power. Let me put that in perspective. Average gas plant, for recording, I presume, yeah. An average gas plant is somewhere in order of about 350 to 500 megawatts. That's kind of your average gas plant. So that's about 4 or 5 of those gas plants. That's how big San Onofre was. But it also provided this thing called reactive power, and I don't want to get into too much of reactive power. But reactive power allows you to move power. And as I indicated, if you import a lot of power, you have to have resources that help move it. And it provides voltage support because we have these pesky requirements that we have to maintain 60 hertz on the grid. That's the frequency of the grid. And if you ever look at the back of electric appliances, you'll see a 60 Hz. That's 60 hertz. That's how the U.S. system works. And you also like to, when you plug things in, you like to get 110 volts. So we have to maintain that. This reactive power helps maintain that voltage. And it helps us import power. So when we lost San Onofre, we lost energy, but we also lost the reactive power and the voltage support, and it's almost as important because of the reliance on imports in Southern California, particularly into San Diego. So what we've done is a multi-phase plan because we had to address all those issues. First, we've put in a number of devices that provide support for reactive power. Now, that doesn't provide you any energy, but it does provide reactive power and hence bolsters the reliability of that imported power. And we put in what are called synchronous condensers at Huntington Beach to the north. And both San Diego Gas and Electric and Southern California Edison have put other reactive devices on the power system. Now, they're not as good as a power plant, but they help. So what we've done is we've gone about kind of band-aiding it together as best we can. We're still going to have additional resources down here. And the plan that we created is one about addressing the reactive power problem, and we can move quicker on that. The second is the opportunity to build additional transmission that brings in more power. And many of you, I know, are eager to have 500,000 volt transmission lines run through your backyard. Is that not correct? So in the face of that, it's not really easy. I mean, frankly, Sunrise was no small lift to get in place. And getting additional transmission is not easy. But part of the plan can be additional generation. The other part of the plan is generation. And you need generation inside load pockets anyway. San Diego itself is a load pocket. And what we'd like to try to do is do that on a 50-50 basis. 50% preferred resources and 50% conventional generation. The preferred resources are things like Dr. Weisenmiller talked about, energy efficiency and demand response. That can help shave off the peak, and you may not need so much generation. It can also help all of you play a role in allowing us resources like air conditioning cycling or just changing dimming of the light and things like that. But some generation is going to be needed. San Diego is currently pursuing the Pio Pico power plant. Part of the issue, you all remember September 8th when you all went out barbecuing with all your friends? Well, part of the issue was a whole lot of power is flowing from the LA basin into San Diego. And when that power link, it's called Path 44 if you're interested, dropped, that's what cut off San Diego from the needed power, and that's when things collapsed. That's why you need to have some generation down here as well, so that we have as much reliability as we can. That in a nutshell is the plan. If we can put in additional Solar particularly, we'll try to do that too. The problem with solar is twofold. One is you'd have to build it out into the desert largely because that's where the sun is. Then you have to bring it in via transmission, although there is some transmission capacity available to bring that in. So we're exploring those kinds of options here. There's a short term, there's a midterm, there's a long-term plan. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Bob, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No. So there's a good summary, Steve. I think the points I wanted to make are first, this is, as Steve said on the plan, we basically work together with the CalISO, the Energy Commission, the PUC, the Air Resources Board, the State Water Board, and the South Coast Air Quality Management District.
And the utility.
And the utilities, certainly SDG&E and Edison were partners in this. So it was a governor's office, pretty comprehensive effort. All of us have our own proceedings where basically we came up with an overall plan. Things are now going through the various proceedings. For example, Steve's organization is now doing a transmission plan. So if you look at the presentations we've given, we've said these are some of the potential pathways for transmission. They're in the process now of weighing various proposals, the cost and benefits of those. By the end of the month, they will come up with a report. That'll work through their process. I think a board adoption sometime in March. Similarly, the PUC is going through some of its regulatory proceedings on sort of in long-term plan about what it means post-songs. We at the Energy Commission have some power plant siting projects pending before us that we're in the process of reviewing. So next summer, all the agencies will get back together again to sort of reassemble the pieces and see how things fit. All these are heavy lifts, I mean, frankly. When you look at, as Steve indicated, new transmission lines are difficult to run through people's spaces. We really are trying to figure out ways to increase the interconnection between the LA Basin and San Diego. But again, it's getting a high voltage line. One of the more creative things is maybe undersea cable. But again, we're trying to figure out how that plays out. Power plant siting, certainly every case we've had has almost all have been particularly controversial. So again, power plant cases on the preferred resources, basically trying to really focus the energy efficiency. I think part of the message is a lot of this is an area where location really matters. We're really looking for resources in Orange County and San Diego. You know, I gave a presentation back in the fall to a group, and someone came running up later saying, I have this great project in San Bernardino. And I was going, well, I spent at least 5 minutes saying these two counties, San Bernardino is not one of them. So, you know, that means this is really ground zero in terms of the location really matters a lot in this, in terms of for these resources. And on the preferred resources, again, we typically say, here's a program Edison-wide. Now we're saying, how do we do this in Orange County? And we're also trying to put together a portfolio. So when we look at some of the of saying, here's putting the rooftop solar in, here's putting the demand response, here's putting the energy efficiency, how do you put it together as a balanced portfolio that can really provide the attributes we're looking for? So given that, one of the aspects of the plan is contingency plans. You know, that one of the things which we're starting to focus on is what can we do if things take longer or basically don't mature, you know, if they turn out to be impossible. So the types of contingency plans we're talking about, and we're certainly working on fleshing those out, is obviously for all of our once-through cooling plants, the Water Board has laid out a schedule to either replace, repower, or retire the plants. And one of the first ones coming up is Encina. You know, you're talking of over 900 megawatts in 2017. So at this stage, we're trying to figure out a way to replace that, or if necessary, start to adjust the timing of when when the Water Board requirements kick in. However, if you look at Encina, those units were built between 59 and 73. So particularly the earlier units were sort of lucky that they've been running as smoothly as they have. And so the notion of continuing reliance upon those is dangerous. So again, we can go to the Water Board and try to make a case for some delay in their requirements, but we have to go through and pick which plants can really operate reliably if we try to buy that additional time. In addition, one of the things which my agency is working with the utilities on is some sort of contingency siting process, so that they will come into us, get permits for projects, but then not build those unless they have to. So the idea is, instead of being in a situation where we're trying to, say, build Sycamore Penasquitos transmission line, or we're trying to do the preferred resources, and we discover that it's just running late, and then coming into us and saying, quick, we need to add something at the last minute. The notion is to have a process where the utilities will come into us, get permits for projects which they actually would just as soon not build, but by having that contingent possibility, have some more time for the preferred resource options to develop, or for some of the transmission lines to be built. So anyway, it's been a pretty challenging situation. We've had we've been very, very lucky in the last 2 summers have been mild. They've been about a 1 and 2, although San Diego, not this summer, but the prior one came within 50 megawatts of its peak. But if you looked overall in Southern California, it was more of a 1 and 2 situation. So again, we don't think we can expect the weather to stay 1 and 2. And obviously at this point, we do have a drought situation, which means that fire hazards are going to be very high this summer, and that could really affect the transmission lines. I get daily reports from the Office of Administrative Services that go through the state's risk. At this point, we have high fire hazards throughout the state, and obviously we've had a couple of fires recently. So by the time we get into the summer, the fire situation could be pretty ghastly. So anyway, it's not a time for complacency is the bottom line.